Okay, so I'm just going to have this little go at drawing this typical sort of, this isn't actually fur from an Alsatian, but it's kind of typical for lots of different animals that you might come across drawing, you know, horses or any long-haired sort of animal. And it's all about sort of the tonal values and how you sort of can create that deep colour and that deep fur look. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to draw a little bit of section of fur here, and I'll go through each stage that you might need. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at the reference picture and think, right, where are the darkest of areas? And so we are typically would have a line art drawing here, but we're just going to do this section. So I can see here straight away that we've got this darkest area here. So I'm just going to use some soft black pastel stick, and I'm just going to put in some of this dark areas here. Now you might normally have this all sort of mapped out with some line art so that you would be able to see which bits are which. But any of the darkest bits, we're just going to block that in with some black. And we're going to put a little bit down here. Heaviest, darkest areas, obviously press a little bit harder. And then we can blend that in with either your finger or blending stump. First bit of pastel I put on, it was probably like this, would use a blending stump because it tends to pick the pastel up and move it around, whereas when you use your finger, A, it gets dirty, and C, it just sort of keeps the pastel in one place. So this will move the pastel around a little bit more, and you can sort of blend it up, and it doesn't matter if it goes off into the other parts of the white, because we want to build a contrast. We want to build something to draw a lighter colour fur on top of. So we're just going to push that into the paper, and like I said, it doesn't matter if it goes over a little bit, just pushing that darkness just to get something down. Now, a couple of other things that it does is the more layers you add into this Clairefontine pastelmatt paper is the smoother obviously the surface will become, because you're filling the tooth of that paper up with pastel, and so when you put the other layers on top, it's not so grainy, and you can sort of get finer lines. There is a tipping point where you can oversaturate the paper and have too much pastel on there, and then you won't be able to put more on. So there we go. So that's the darkest areas that we've got. The next thing we want to do is look at what sort of other base colours we have. So we have some, obviously in this picture we have a lot of brown, so I'm going to use the closest match colour in the soft pastel just to sort of fill in some of these gaps here. And it sort of does go over the black a little bit as well, so we'll just fill that in. And these are just sort of the base colours. And here what I'll do, because I will do the same and push that brown in on the sort of white parts, and just keep going around in circles until it's pushed in as much as it can be, and then I can go over the dark parts a little bit lighter just to give that brown tone into the blackest areas. But we want to go over it because we want to be able to put our layers on top. Right, so now we've got a fairly good base layer. We can still see some of the white paper showing through here, so really we want to try and cover that up a little bit. So I can see some other colours showing through here. So I think what I'm going to do is add that. I'm going to add a little bit of a more orangey colour now to some of this, just to brighten this up a little bit. But what I'm basically doing is filling in that white white paper that we've still got showing, and at the same time it adds another colour. And we don't want to go too mad here, so we want to push that in so that it's sort of as even as we can get it. A little bit heavier in these different areas, but that's fine. Okay, so now we've got a base layer. Now we want to come in and do our darkest fur. So in this area here we can see black, we can see highlighted areas. Now we might think, oh great, we'll go straight in with a lighter colour here. We want to go in with our darker colours first, so we're going to go in with a 190, so it's like the reddish brown. It's a similar colour to this, and what we're going to do is we're just going to start drawing the fur in the direction of the fur. Now we can use the black too, but what I want to do is integrate the black, so you'll see what I mean now. Some people will say, oh, use all your dark colours first and then your light, and you can do it that way and it works fine. I tend to just like to do this because I can mix the black up a little bit, so it gives us a little idea as well of where we're going. So all of this, just add little bits in where you see that reddy sort of coloured fur. It disappears down here. Now this fur sort of goes in different directions. Now when you want the fur to come towards the camera, it can be a bit tricky, so if you get your pencil and you just sort of stub it out a little bit, then that can sort of give you the impression that the fur is more towards you than it is. Overdoing it a little bit here just to show you, than it is going sort of down or across. I'm just going to go around filling in all of the fur that's this deep reddy brown, trying to go in the general direction that I see the fur going in, and everywhere that it hasn't got a lot of it, we're just going to put a tiny bit in just to give that hint. And here. Now the dark areas we'll do next. Now with the dark areas, what you're tending to do is draw the shadow between the hair. So you're not sort of drawing, because a lot of it isn't necessarily black fur, it's actually just the shadow between the other fur. So we're going to get our black, and we're going to come back in now, and we're just going to go and put that black in. Now the reason I'm doing this over this red is once we put our black down, it's a little bit harder to correct any mistakes, and so once we put that red colour down, it gives us a guide of, you know, a more matched guide of where we want it to go. So we can see that where we want these darker bits, we can just start to draw and just pull the pencil down in, sort of keep turning the pencil. You get that point, keeps your pencil sharp a bit longer, and then try and go in the general direction of the fur. Now the other thing to bear in mind, and I say it a lot in my other tutorials, is what fur overlaps what fur. So you might have fur here, see, as we can see, this is the dark, so this fur comes around here, but then this fur here overlaps this, so bear that in mind. So you want to make sure that when you do this, you sort of draw this fur first before you finalize this fur. At this stage it's not so much of a problem because these are sort of the under layers that you're doing. We've got much darker area around here, so I'm just going to use the pencil a little bit more on its side. And it's just trying to think ahead a little bit of which bits of fur you're going to do the 4 other bits. So here we're just trying to put in all of the darkest areas. And again, this area where it sort of comes out and around. And there's a few darker bits around here that come down. And then this is all quite dark. Okay, and then we can get our blending stump and we can blend that in, and we can use that by going in the direction of the fur. So we're going in the direction of the fur. And we're just keeping those lines, but we're just tapping the fur in so that we can still see the direction, but it's obviously pushing it all in, getting a good feel for this under painting. And it'll allow us to put more fur on top. Okay, so now we've also got some purples in here. So this is why you can find all the different colours that perhaps you didn't used to see in pictures and things. You will start to notice more the more you start to draw. We have all these different colours that are reflecting the lights, the different lights that we have. I'm going to use my purple. I'm just going to start adding in a bit of purple. You don't need to go quite so mad because the purple against the black can show up quite nicely without too much. We'll put a little bit around here. Just a few little strands in here. Down here, just a little bit. And we've also got some blues, so we'll use a little bit of a blue as well. So you can use whatever colours you want. I'm not going to worry too much about the numbers of these pencils because this is just an exercise. It would depend completely on the type of drawing you're doing, on which colours you want to use. So now you can see we're starting to get a little bit more detail in this fur. And then we can use our blending stump again to blend some of that in a bit. What we want is the tonal sort of value of that colour to mix into the background rather than being too prominent. So when the other colours come on top, they mix with it slightly, and so you don't see it there in your face, but it's there. It gives that, reflects that colour into the depth of the picture a little bit. Okay, so now we have a bit more of an orangey colour. what I will do now is I'll add the darker brown. So this is like a dark, very dark brown. We're going to use that to fill in the rest of this. So we're just going to draw the fur in with it. And we're not going to go as mad on the lighter areas, but we are still going to cover it. Because it will give it that dark but also that brown tone. You can use it to darken up some of these areas now. I'm using a pencil, so I'm using it straight and on its side, depending on what I'm looking at. Now this picture may not match the fur exactly because I haven't drawn out the line art on this. This is just to give you some idea of how you can sort of tackle building up that depth of colour in the fur and that deep fur look. It is something I do get asked a little bit about, and I know some people do sort of struggle sometimes. You concentrate on all the technical parts of noses and eyes and ears and whatnot, but you don't, sometimes you need to sort of work on just the basics, which is the fur, which makes up, 95% of most pictures, animal pictures. I think the only trouble is with fur is it can, if it's a big picture, get a bit monotonous when you're drawing. If that happens, move on to a different bit or have a break from your drawing. And then we're using our blending stump just to, again, smooth that in. Now I'm using the blending stump lightly, so I'm using just the weight of the stump, and I'm just so that it doesn't really blend that fur in. It doesn't make it all muddy and just saturate it completely. It just sort of pushes it almost in situ, sort of softens it up a bit, blends it slightly with the pastel underneath, but not too much that you can't see the lines. Okay, and now we've got something that we're quite happy with in the form of the base layer of fur. Now we can start adding the lighter layers, and this is where it starts to look a lot more like the fur, hopefully, that we want. So I'm going to come in now with a lighter brown. And I'm just going to start drawing that in. We still have darker areas to redo, but we're just going to put this on the light areas at the moment. As you can see now, we're really starting to get a little bit more depth and shape into this fur. And we can start sort of wisping bits now, because these are the top layers, so some of these bits of hair you will see. So I'm just dragging it down so we've got thin bits of hair, and if we do have any thick bits, they're at the start and they flick away into thinner bits. Again, in this area we're going to sort of push it like this into different ways, and you get a lot of this sort of fur around necklines of animals. Where it's sort of, it's not short fur, it's sort of just going in different directions, or it's coming towards the camera, and it can be a bit tricky to get it to look right. As you can see now, it blends with that under fur, and it sort of starts to look really quite good, because those darker areas are filling in those shadowed, sort of shadowy bits, and that's giving us a bit of depth then to our fur. And it's always good to do the odd bit of fur that goes in a different direction. It's not, natural for an animal to just have all fur straight in one direction. You get flyaway hairs, and adding just that odd flyaway hair sometimes really can make the difference between a good picture that you're happy with and something that you're not so. And obviously here we're having longer sort of straggly hairs that come down over this dark area. And at this stage you can always go back in if you want to darken any of the areas up and sort of add in a little bit more dark, but you're going to have to start drawing it in as fur because you don't want it to be too overwhelming. Just darken some of these areas up, which gives it a little bit more depth. And I think we're going to put a little bit more red in there as well. So this is the reddy brown. And as that goes in over the top of this black, it really sort of starts to bring it to life and give it that depth and reality. Again, there's a little bit of sort of a purple colour tone to some of this, so add a little bit more in, very light pressure. Now we can put a little bit more of an orangey colour in, so this is like the lighter colours. Not too much with the orange on this picture, but it does bring in some highlights to these browns once it mixes in with that fur underneath. It gives like a highlighted brown look to it. I think we're just going to darken some of this up a little bit more before we add any of our final colours. This area is actually probably a little bit more red than dark. So what we're going to do is exactly that. We're going to actually add a red. So this is a red. just going to add that to these black areas, and that will give much sort of darker, blacker red, which is more of the colour we're looking for. I can add bits of this red here and there. And that's the thing, there's so many different colours in a dog's fur than you might initially think. And now we're going to add a little bit of pink. So this is just a light pink. Now these are the layers that you'll see, and this is where, you know, we're adding this in, and we're trying to make sure this fur starts to look like fur, and this is really what will bring it alive now. So wherever you see these sort of slightly pinker colours, add it in. And now this fur can go over this darker fur underneath. And like I said, just do it in slightly different directions as you see it. You flick in some of this fur. And then we come along and add in even lighter colours. And these are your lightest colours, so you want to add them wherever you see them. Yard fur going slightly off track, we've got some highlights down here, and then this fur comes over the top. And then we can really use these light colours then to finish things off. And the lighter layers obviously bring a little bit more depth then to your picture, because they're bringing it out onto the foreground, and the darks and the shadows are bringing the background, and the, you know, just basically making it into a more of a deeper 3D looking picture. And then don't be afraid to use some white, which is going to be even lighter again, just to sort of add that extra layer, highlights any extra bits of highlight that you want to do, so any bits of fur that curve around, or And then a little trick here that I use a lot of, and that is I use a thin blend-in stump by the packs, and I use that, and I just use that then to soften the fur a bit, because using the thin blend-in stump you miss sort of the majority of it, or you've got more control, and you can just use it to blend a little bit more precisely and miss enough of the fur to make sure you keep those highlights. Okay, and then to finish it off, if you want to add any sort of other darker colours again, and it's just a case of going over and over until you're happy with what you have. One pencil or two pencils that I recommend anyone who's doing pastel animals is the Derwent Sepia P5, I think it's the P530, and this aluminium grey P680. As you'll see, it gives you those colours, and they're slightly softer, so they blend really well. Oops. They blend really well, and they give a colour that it's very hard to get. So this is a very light sort of grey colour. And it mixes beautifully with the undercolours, and you can't quite get the colour you're looking for. And this is the sepia, which is a sort of a brown, but it's a brown again that it's hard to sort of get in any of the other colours, but it always seems to be a colour that is great when you're drawing animals. Put just a little bit more black in this area here. And then a little bit more of that orangey colour. Mix that into the black. And a little bit more of that reddy brown. Then just and you can keep going, keep adding, but that is how I would generally draw that type of fur. And so I hope that's been helpful for you, and I look forward to seeing you in all the other tutorials.